In this video, I'm going to teach you how to win your fantasy football draft. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video on the channel. Before I get started with any of my fantasy football talk, I want to mention new JSN jersey. Come on now. Nah, but in all seriousness, though, I actually am very, very excited from where I got this jersey. So make sure to stay tuned because there is definitely going to be a video coming out about that. But to get to the point of this video, I'm going to teach you how to win your fantasy football draft. Now, I am a certified fantasy professional. I'm just an idiot who likes making videos. And so I feel like I'm qualified to give you the step-by-step guide on how to win any fantasy league you're in. Because if you're like me, you're in about 6 of them, seven. You're in about 7 of them, and you're going to need a step-by-step guide on how to win and talk shit to all your friends. So this is exactly why I'm making this video. And if you guys want more fantasy content on this channel, make sure to smash that subscribe. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. We're trying to reach that by opening kickoff of the NFL season. But let's go ahead and get right into it. Step number 1 on how to win your fantasy football league is to know the scoring format of your league. Now, this seems like an obvious step, but a lot of people just go into their drafts not knowing what the scoring format is. Is it PPR? Is it half PPR? Is there super flex? Is there, I've seen leagues where there is plus 0.25 for carries. Know the scoring. It'll very much help you when drafting your players. You need to know how every position is scored, everything like that. That needs to be the first thing that you look into for your fantasy league. The second thing that you guys need to be doing is make a big board. Now, this is a step that I feel like some people don't do, but I would highly, highly recommend it. Here's the thing. You got to do it like this, right? Make a big board of your running backs, your receivers, your tight ends, your quarterbacks, and then what you should do, and this is a very important second step, cross-reference that list with the list of the host site that you're running your draft on. So if you're doing ESPN, check out ESPN's rankings, cross-reference. And I don't know if you guys can see it from the camera, but I have certain players' names underlined on my list, and that is because I value them more than the websites do, or the certain whatever database I'm drafting on, and that means that I think I can get steals from them later on in the draft. The next thing that I want you to do, and if you're in a redraft league, I want you to be able to pick where you draft. Now, obviously, I know each league kind of does their own thing. Sometimes people randomize it, sometimes they play games to decide it. If you can pick where you draft, pick in the dead middle of your draft. So if you're in a 10-man league, go with 5, 12-man 6, 14-man go 7. The reason I want you to go in the middle is because it gives you the least amount of players in between picks that other people can take, right? So hey, there's going to be 12 guys, there's going to be 14 guys in between each pick. You can kind of play the board that way. I recently had the 12th overall pick, and it sucked because I had to go 12, and then I went 13, and then I had to wait until the board all the way snaked back around. It was terrible. I got like shit players in the 3rd round. Wouldn't recommend it. So try to position yourself right in the middle of your draft. Now, speaking of the actual draft itself, I want to say one thing, and this kind of applies for the whole draft as a whole. Thing number 1, read the draft board and read your opponents. If you're in a league with your family, if you're in a league with your buddies, anything like that, that makes it a lot easier to understand who you're going against. Is this one guy a Cowboys fan? Maybe you snatch up Tony Pollard right before him. Is somebody you're playing an Eagles fan? Maybe you go and take Jalen Hurts a little bit earlier if you really want him. Knowing the players and knowing the board as just kind of a prerequisite before the draft starts, I think is going to be something that's going to help you. It's going to help you to understand people's tendencies, where they're going to pick, who they like. Maybe they have a certain favorite player. Maybe a doofus shows up to your fantasy draft wearing a 90s throwback Jackson Smith and Jigba jersey, and you probably want to leapfrog them if you want JSN later on in the draft. So getting into the draft itself, let's start with round 1. And with round 1, here's my philosophy. Take the player that you're most comfortable with. Again, whether you're sitting at 1st overall and you want to take a Justin Jefferson, you're sitting in the middle and you think, oh, maybe I'll take like an Austin Eckler. End of the 1st round, maybe you want to go with like a CeeDee Lamb or something. 1st round, take the player that you feel most comfortable with. This shouldn't be a guy with a lot of red flags. This shouldn't be a guy that you're wishy-washy about. This should be the guy that you are most confident is going to be a stud for your team. Take him in the 1st round. Now, in round 2, I would go with a running back. Now, there are some running backs that I think are really, really like in the draft. However, I think the well runs dry at running back a lot quicker than it does at receiver. So you want to make sure you get one of these good running backs, and you'll still have time later in the draft to get good value at wide receiver. So for running backs in the second round, you can kind of take your pick. Maybe Tony Pollard's left. Maybe you like Kenneth Walker. Maybe you like Aaron Jones. Maybe you like Travis Etienne, especially in a PPR league. I think that's a really good get in the second or third round. And then at round 3, this kind of depends based on what you did with round 1. If in round 1 you went with a wide receiver, I would again go running back in round 3. But if you went running back at round 1, I wouldn't recommend going running back, running back, running back. So in round 3, I'm going to go with best receiver available. This, again, if you're lucky, could be a guy like DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, maybe you like Calvin Ridley. So round 3 goes the opposite of what you did in round 1. Now in round 4, this gets a little interesting, and this is where I think some people are going to start to disagree with me. In round 4, if available, I would go with one of the truly elite quarterbacks. Now, in my opinion, there's about 4 or 5 elite game-changing quarterbacks for fantasy. Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Lamar, and Justin Fields. If one of those guys is on the board in round 4, I would snatch him up. Now, I know there's definitely value at QB down the board, and I'll get into that in a second, but I think you really just want to secure yourself one of the top 4 or 5 studs at quarterback for fantasy, and if you have the chance to do that in the 4th round, I really think you should consider it. Again, in rounds 5 and 6, I would go with receiver for both of those rounds. I think you can get some good players still on the board. A couple guys you can consider getting there like George Pickens, Terry McLaurin, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Christian Kirk. Filling in your wide receivers, I think, is going to be really good. And again, I think 4, 5, 6 is going to be a round where you could still get some really, really good wide receivers. And I would love to do that. Again, you have at this point 2 running backs, maybe one wide receiver from the first round. You have 2 running backs, you have a quarterback, and now you're going with more wide receivers to fill out your roster. In round 7, this is where I'm going to recommend one specific player, and this is a guy that's going to help your running back situation. It's one of the best values at running back, I think, in the entire draft. In round 7, I would go with Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert is going to be, I think, a really good fantasy player for the Bears this year, and he's not going high at all. In like almost every single ADP database, he is not going very high. In round 7, I would seriously consider snatching up Khalil Herbert if I were you guys. I think he's going to be a plus bench option at running back and or a low tier like running back 2, running back 3 type of guy, depending on how many running backs are in your starting lineup. And I think, I really do think he's a good option, and he's a really good get in round 7. In round 8, my philosophy is once again go best receiver on the board. Maybe you can get some guys like Jahan Dotson or Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett is just kind of always solid. He's just really like solid. Tyler Lockett, Jahan Dotson, who I think is going to have a good year in round 8. Round 9, this is where I would take your backup quarterback. Now, I am in mostly super flex leagues, so 2 quarterbacks are important. If you're not, I get if you don't want to draft a quarterback in the 9th round, especially if you just took one in the 4th. But I think there's some good value. You can go with Geno Smith, Aaron Rodgers. There might be a Kirk Cousins on the board. And if you're really feeling ballsy and he's still on the board, you could snag up an Anthony Richardson. Now, round 10 is where I would go with your tight ends. And again, I think this is a position where you can wait and still get really good value. Dalton Kincaid is going to be on the board in round 10, probably. Juwan Johnson, who is one of the steals in all of fantasy football, is going to be on the board in round 10. Tight end position is probably the least important starting position in fantasy, unless you want to include like kickers and defense. But Juwan Johnson, I think, is going to have a good year with the Saints. He's got a stable quarterback situation, and him and Derek Carr seem to have a really good connection so far. So Juwan Johnson, going rookie tight end is a bit rich for my liking, but Dalton Kincaid is going to be probably the number 2 offense on that Bills, receiving core. He's going to be that number 2 option, excuse me. And then rounds 11, round 12, again, your choice, running back, receiver. Some interesting names here: Devin Achane, Elijah Mitchell, Quentin Johnston, Elijah Moore. I think those are some guys I would consider taking in rounds 11 and 12. And then kind of moving past, I say just go best player available for a couple rounds. And then I would start going defense in round 14. I feel like a couple good defenses that you can get in that range would be like Miami, maybe Cleveland. If you're lucky, Dallas fell to pick up if you have a defensive slot on your team. Rounds 15, round 17, I would go with either running back or receiver, whichever is best on the board. 16 is probably where I would start going with quarterbacks. I think Jason Myers is probably a good get. Greg Zuerlein is also a good get. I think the Jets are going to score a lot of points. And then with your round 18 pick, I think you just want to go with the guy with the most upside. Whoever's left on the board, whether that be Darnell Mooney, whether that be Zay Jones, whether that be Tajay Spears, anything like that, I would go with, and I would try to get the most upside possible in like your 18th overall pick. But that is kind of my strategy to win my fantasy leagues. This is the strategy that I've applied to pretty much every single draft that I've done this year, and I guess time will tell how well the strategy worked. But if you disagree or if you agree with my draft strategy here, make sure to let me know in the comments down below. Once again, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Peace.